Go ahead and get started. I'm Heather Rodemaker-Taylor with First Nations Owista, and I'm excited to welcome you to our panel discussion today on partnering on larger loans. Our hope is that participants are going to leave the webinar with more information about how loan participations work, benefits of these kind of partnerships, and strategies for success with them. And we thought this topic would be helpful to those CDFIs already engaged in loan participations, those looking into it, and maybe those just getting started who might want to keep it in mind for the future as they grow as an organization. And this webinar is the 15th webinar in a monthly series as part of the Native CDFI Capital Access Initiative some of you are participating in, which is funded by the Northwest Area Foundation. And I say this for all these webinars, but what's great about the series is that all the topics discussed focus on different ways to grow your capacity to access capital or different capital sources, which is a challenge that we all face. And I also want to point out that, like we do for all these webinars, we'll be recording it, so you'll be able to revisit the information later if you like. And we also want to direct your attention to a shared handout in the webinar platform that our panelists thought would be a good read for you all, and we'll also share it with you after the webinar. It's a 2015 report by the Opportunity Finance Network titled CDFI Collaborations, Keys to Success. So definitely feel free to check that out as well as a good resource. And now just to get us prepared briefly, I'm going to let Stephanie highlight some of the GoToWebinar platform features.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for taking time to join us. I'd like you to navigate yourself to the question and answer field of the webinar platform. It should be on your upper right-hand corner. And please answer the following question. What organization are you representing today? I know we ask that question for every webinar, but we just like to see where people are coming from and who they're representing across the nation.
And we'll just give you all a couple of seconds to fill that out, and we see some responses coming in.
Yeah, we have representation from the USDA Rural Development, Leech Lake Financial Services, Community Development Specialist for Meskwaki Nation, and Nimiipuu Community Development Fund. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar presentation, please don't hesitate to use this. Just type in the question and we'll answer it in a break period. And we will also have a question and answer section at the end of the presentation.
Yep.
So back to you, Heather.
Thanks. Thanks, Stephanie. Yep, and I also see Native American Development Corporation out in Montana, so welcome. Yeah, so all that being said, I want to introduce our wonderful panel today. We're joined by Dave Castillo. He's the Chief Executive Officer from Native Capital Access, Denise Carr, she's a loan officer with Native Community Finance, and Erica Lindholm. She's Vice President and Senior Business Lender with Craft 3. So thank you all so much for your time and sharing your experience with us today. I want to move on into introductions. Just have you all introduce yourselves and really what perspective you feel like you bring to this conversation about partnering on larger loans / loan participation. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave, then Denise, then Erica. So Dave, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. This is Dave Castillo from Native Capital Access, based out of Phoenix metro area, serving Southwest U.S. And I guess what we bring to it is, we've definitely experienced a number of different kinds of partnerships for participations and other purposes, and I think no need to reinvent the wheel if there's something that other Native CDFIs can learn from it. We'd love to share that information with you and learn from you as well in terms of what you've been able to do. So, thank you.
Thanks, Dave. And what about you, Denise?
Hi, I'm Denise Carr with Native Community Finance. As stated, I am the loan officer. I believe I'm one of the younger panelists here. But being a smaller CDFI as well with a, how can I word this? With a staff of 4, we do work with our entire state, and just with partnering and whatnot, I believe I can provide a lot of information as far as how to partner with the tribal entities and possibly even working with the HUD 184s and whatnot. So I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Denise. And how about you, Erica?
Thanks, Heather. Yes, so I'm Erica Lindholm, business lender with Craft3, and while I haven't myself personally done participations for Craft3, Craft3 has done many participations with particularly Native American CDFIs in our footprint, which is Oregon and Washington. And while I've also done a lot of participations in my previous work in other CDFIs in Colorado, but Craft3 is specifically interested in supporting Native American and Indian country CDFIs because we believe that's our sort of best avenue into supporting those communities where, you know, I think the needs, some of the needs that we strive to fulfill as a CDFI are the greatest in the Indian country communities here. We have 29 tribes in Washington, and I believe it's 9 in Oregon, so we've got a lot in our footprint. So,
thank you. And thank you, everybody, for those lovely introductions. I think that the biggest thing that you all bring beyond your experience is just the different perspectives that are going to give everybody kind of a good idea of what loan participations kind of look like from these different angles. So, yeah. And we're going to also try to inform our panelists a little more about you by kind of conducting a couple of group polls. So we're going to pull those up now, too, to kind of feed into the discussion. So the first group poll is, what is the average size loan made by your native CDFI? And so you can answer less than 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000, 10,000, 1 to 50,000, 50,000, and 1 to 100,000, over 100,000. And feel free to not answer if it's not applicable, like you're not yet lending or you're not a CDFI. So we'll just give you all a couple of seconds to fill that out. Okay, we're seeing the results coming now. It looks like 20% of y'all said less than 1,000, 20% said 1,000 to 10,000, 20% said 10,001 to 50,000, and 40% of y'all said 50,001 to 100,000. So I think it's just a good idea. And then we're going to have just 2 more short questions. So we also want to know, do your clients require ongoing credit counseling? And so you can answer yes, no, or not applicable. So we'll give you all a couple more seconds. Oh, and I'm seeing some results in here. We have 33% of y'all said yes, 17% said no, and 50% said not applicable. So we're just going to move into our last poll. It's going to be pretty short, too. Do you currently do loan participation? So yes, no, maybe you're in process of doing so, or not applicable. I'll give you just a couple more seconds, and then we're going to dig into our panel discussion. Okay, it's looking like 17% said yes, 33% said no, 33% said in process, and 17% said not applicable. So David, Dave, Denise, and Erica, I hope that helps you to kind of get a feel for our audience. So great. So we're just going to move into some of the discussion with our panel members. And the first question I had for all of our panelists was, could you describe your organization and an overview of how your organization currently partners on larger loans? And we can kind of go in the same order. So Dave, Denise, Erica. So Dave, could you explain more about your organization?
Yeah, hi again. Yeah, so we're a regional native CDFI. We started out doing loans for housing development. and then we've moved into small business loans as well as community infrastructure, community facilities loans for tribes. We've done off-reservation loans as well. In terms of the partners, it's really been kind of a process. I think from the beginning, when we got started, we understood that we couldn't provide and shouldn't be the only source of capital in tribal projects. That we really needed to act more as a catalyst more than anything. It's funny because when we would kind of talk to bankers and folks in conferences in the early days, people would say, "Oh, it's great. You guys are helping to teach tribes how to use debt," and it really seemed kind of it was a little strange because those same individuals would be pretty ignorant about kind of how to engage tribes. So the joke was that yeah, we provide TA to tribes, but in reality, we provided just as much, if not more, training, technical assistance, kind of liaison services, education to banks, lending institutions, state, federal agencies, and others who had an interest in serving tribes but maybe didn't have any kind of track record. In terms of the current partners that we have, it's funny, we did a kind of informal analysis of where we've gotten leads from over the years, looking at trade shows and speaking engagements and conferences and contacts and board members and et cetera, and it was a little bit of a surprise to me, maybe not so much. Other people kind of told me that they could have predicted it, but a lot of the leads that we've gotten and the partnerships that we've had come from the relationships that me and some key people have developed over 20 years of working in the industry or in some other facet. I used to do policy work for tribes, and then through some key stakeholders and partners that would just generate those leads or help facilitate those partnerships. So it really is, again, it's not a big surprise, but in any country it really is who you know, and those degrees of separation, aren't very far apart. So if, it's pretty easy to network, and as long as you've invested the time in developing those relationships and maintaining those relationships and honoring those relationships, it really does pay off.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dave. And what about you, Denise? Kind of speak more about how your organization partners on loans or participates in some of these loans.
Okay, well, just kind of an overview of NCF first. We were created back in 2007, so we're fairly new still yet as well. But going on to partnering, and as far as the larger loans go, we do a lot of construction loans, predatory lending, some business lending, and just kind of a little tidbit. We also do financial and home buyers education and individual development accounts. But our biggest ones are the construction loans, specifically with the HUD 184, just because the banks don't like to deal with the whole sovereign immunity thing on the tribal lands. Mm-hmm. And of course, with us natives, we tend not to like to wander off. And so where we come in as NCF is we take the riskier part and we oversee the construction. And this is done over a 6-month period, and with this kind of word of mouth and networking as well, we are able to create relationships and more partnerships, like for instance with the Laguna Pueblo here in New Mexico. We actually assisted them on creating their own mortgage program for their tribal members, and where we were able to partner up on that, we are actually overseeing the money for them as far as accounts go. We do the underwriting. If they are in need of one-on-one financial education, if they don't necessarily qualify, we help them to get qualified for the loan. And one of the things that the tribe also wanted was homebuyers education, just so that they are prepared, just because it is such a large asset. Again, continuing on with Pueblo relations, the other Pueblo within New Mexico is San Felipe, and we oversee a lot of their construction loans as far as the HUD 184 goes. I guess, let me see, I'm trying to think what else I can put into input, but primarily the construction loans are what we do. We are currently working with USDA, that way we can get a lot of the lower income people qualified. Over the years, we've kind of had a little difficulties. We've been able to qualify one person so far as of recently. It is new, but overall, being able to work through the nooks and crannies of everything, things are possible, and we are growing even though we are such a small entity.
Thank you, Denise. And what about you, Erica? Can you describe a little bit of, Craft 3's engagement with loan participations, especially in Indian country? Oh, you were muted. Sorry about that. I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I can hear you. I was here. Were you not able to hear it? So I was talking and you guys couldn't hear me yet?
Nope, it was muted. Sorry about that.
Okay. No, that's fine. So I will start over. I was just saying that Craft 3 has been around since 1994, serving Oregon and Washington, and we've grown quite a bit in that time. We started off as a rural CDFI in Ilwaco, Washington, which nobody's ever heard of, but that sort of is very important, the fact that we've have rural roots and small town roots, but we have grown to serve both urban and rural markets throughout Oregon and Washington. We're now 140 million in total assets, and we have our loan volume averages about 40 million a year annually. So, and we do both commercial and consumer loans. We have very two specific products for consumer lending, but the bulk of our work is in commercial lending to businesses, nonprofits, and we've loaned directly to tribes as well as city governments and stuff. But our participation, we've participated in many different ways with Native in Indian country, with both directly to natives and Native American enterprises as well as CDFIs, and we've done that in a variety of ways, from sort of both being involved, Craft 3 and another Native CDFI such as the Tala Fund, loaning directly to a borrower, and each of us holding our own notes separately to the same borrower, and then just kind of staying in communication throughout that the loan term about how that borrower is doing. We've also done the more traditional where one of us, usually it's Craft 3, loans to the borrower, and then the Tala Fund or the Native CDFI will purchase a part of that loan from us, and we service it, and that helps grow the balance sheet for that Native CDFI. It's just another additional loan that they are able to put on their books. But we also provide wholesale loans directly into Native CDFIs, investing in them to, at a very well below our cost of capital, with the intention, of having them re-lend that capital in Indian country, in their communities, and hopefully we can partner with them. They use our wholesale loan to do their portion of a loan that we then either participate in as another loan in the overall project or what have you. But again, our focus is very much in Indian country on building the assets within Indian country so that they can, build their own capacity to serve their own communities. So I will mention our USDA community facilities re-lend money is another way we hope to partner with Native CDFIs going forward, but I can talk about that during the opportunities section.
Thanks, Eric. And I thought it was so interesting that you were saying that you actually lend out to Native CDFIs at under your cost of capital. So I thought that was good to point out.
Yeah.
So I just want to move on to the next question, and this one again is for all the panelists. So what would you say is the benefit to your organization in taking part in loan participation? So in other words, why as an organization do you want to take part in loan participations, and what do you see as the importance of these partnerships or participations? And so we can go in the same order, Dave, Denise, Erica. So Dave, what would you say about that?
Well, I mean, I think like most of us, we're small. We're too small. We were talking about some of the things we were putting in place, and we've really got, I think, some very good systems in place. But based on the size of our organization, our best still is below industry best standards in some cases. And I think, you can just extrapolate that to kind of products and services and, meeting the needs of the clients. When we talk about larger loans, I mean, yeah, we're doing, on average around $100,000, $200,000 loans. But some of the projects that we financed are very capital intensive, in terms of the size of our fund. The actual need is much larger, or there's a need. And the other thing is that most of the money that we have is short-term money, 5-year money. And there's a tremendous need for long-term debt, 20, 25, 30-year money, which I'm glad to hear the USDA is on the line because they've got some fantastic products to fill that gap. And then there's others, types of funds that we just aren't eligible for, like or haven't had direct access to, like the CFI bond guarantee money. So I think just generally speaking, like I said before, we intended to be a catalyst and really our intent, and our mission is to increase access and use of private sector capital so that it's just as readily available in use on tribal lands as in any non-Indian community. And so what that necessarily means is that we want to activate, we want to make sure that those partners that are out there like CRAFT-3 and other non-native CFIs that have an interest in lending on tribes, on tribal lands are able to do that, banks included. So I think it benefits everybody. I've met a lot of folks from small community banks or regional banks or state or federal agencies that have a very strong desire to serve tribes and Indian country generally, but they just don't know where to start. So I think it's very, very mutual in terms of the the outcomes and the benefits.
Thank you, Dave. And Denise, what about you? What would you say, especially as a very small organization, like you were saying, is the benefit to your group in taking part in these loan participations? I definitely see the benefit in being able to bring housing to different areas across the state. What would you say, like, in what ways do you benefit as a staff and organizationally?
I think Dave pretty much hit the nail on the head. Of course, increase revenue, the partnerships, the networking, and the more that the other CDFIs realize that it is possible, there, as David stated, that there is that interest of helping natives, especially within on the native land, because they don't know how to work around the certain laws and implementations that are within certain programs. And just being smaller and seeing that we are able to have that capability, we're able to create the ongoing relationships, which of course comes back and benefits the smaller CDFIs as well, because of course there is that interest to help assist them and vice versa. Yeah, just really the increased capital, the increased revenue, the partnerships, the ongoing networking, which of course is important as a smaller CDFI, because that's kind of what we live on, I guess you can say, for lack of a better word, because we are a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Denise. And I know you were mentioning when the CDFI was started. Do you feel like since y'all started with the loan participations that it's helped you kind of grow your balance sheet and grow as an organization maybe faster than if you weren't doing it at all?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, overall we have, let me see, looking at our stats, so we do have 176 loans for over $2 million with currently outstanding balance of 1.5, but our default rate right now is currently less than 1%.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely we are growing. It's just more so working with the partners and the individuals that do come in looking for that assistance.
That's fantastic. And what about you, Erica? What would you say the benefit is to Craft 3 and kind of getting to partner with Native CDFIs or tribal entities on these loans?
Yeah, thanks. And I find it interesting what Dave has said about, how non-Native CDFIs, there's a lot of them that want to participate but don't know where to start, and I agree with that. And I think that Craft 3 might have once upon a time been in that category of saying, we want to know how to do this, and we've the best way to do that is to partner with CDFIs in Indian country. But we're beyond that now, and we've definitely done so much work in Indian country now that we know where to start. But I would say we continue to have a strong interest in the partnerships for two primary reasons, and they're equally important. One is delivering a capital plus to our borrowers. We're really, I think we're unusual as a CDFI in at least how we've grown, in that we are very feet on the ground intensive. We have 8 locations, even though we serve just 2 states. We have 8 office locations because we really believe in the importance of being in the communities that we serve and having people be our eyes on what's happening in the community and how our borrowers are faring in the community. And so because, while 8 offices sounds like a lot, it's still like, Oregon and Washington are big states, and so that's not nearly enough to cover all the ground. And we want to have people on the ground in the communities that we care the most about serving. And so the Native CDFIs that are there in those communities act as our, a way to deliver the capital plus and the feet on the ground sort of feedback loop. And that is not only a way to, so that's a way to deliver our mission, but the flip side of that is it's also risk mitigation for us. Having partners in loans with us in those communities, watching the borrowers, watching what's happening in the community, and helps alert us to problems earlier than we might otherwise know of them. So, mission and risk management, I think.
Thank you, Erica. And then I had another question for a couple of you. What recommendations or tips would you give to Native CDFIs on partnering on larger loans? So first I want to turn this question to you, Denise. especially for those native CDFIs that are smaller in size and smaller in staff capacity, based on size, what would be some recommendations that you would give of things, that have worked for you, or tips that have helped y'all work through some challenges maybe?
First of all, I guess don't be afraid to explore and attempt to try new things, because really if you don't take that risk, you're really not going to know the opportunity that is there. And even if it's a hit and miss, live and learn. But as a smaller CDFI, we do, again, we have 4 staff members overseeing all recognized tribes in the state of New Mexico. We do have 19 pueblos, 1 nation. As part of the cross-training, my title is the loan officer, but I also do grant writing. I do a lot of the underwriting. I go out and oversee the construction, finishing up one of my degrees as a project manager. So we wear so many hats within the companies, but it seems overwhelming once you do find a good routine. It works. And plus, once with working with so many entities and people across the state, when one person's out of the office, it's easier to contact another person, and at least another staff member is able to continue on with that set project or that set loan. But it's just to continue, please continue networking, please continue looking for those partnerships. Just overall, don't be afraid.
Thanks. And Eric, for those native CDFIs that are looking into partnering and are trying to maybe ready themselves organizationally or put their best foot forward, from your perspective, what would you recommend, like I said, from the partner perspective? And again, draw from your experience in working with native CDFIs in your footprint.
Sure. And I guess I'll echo what Denise said, though, about, just getting started with this process. Don't, there's the easiest way to jump in is to talk to other CDFIs about purchasing loans in their portfolio, or, saying, hey, I can help you access borrowers in Indian country and sort of understand how to do it out here, but let me buy into your loan. Why don't you be the lead lender, and just that way. If you're doing it that way, it's not like, at least I would find it hard to believe another CDFI would need to, that the lead lender CDFI would need to carefully underwrite you necessarily. We would, if you're helping us access the borrowers and sort of the intelligence on the ground, it's not important to have all your ducks in a row, because we're taking your capital to help fund the loan and not the other way around. Now, if you are seeking to be the lead lender yourselves and have other CDFIs purchase parts of your loans, or if you're seeking a wholesale investment from other CDFIs, it's really, really critical to focus on all your written policies and make sure you're following them. Namely, make it sure that you have clear, you can share something written that outlines your approval authority and processes, how you monitor your portfolio, how you collect, and how you determine your loan loss reserves, and how frequently you, and what your methodology is for that, and how frequently you adjust for that. So having clear policies written, and then also very good documentation between you your CDFI and your borrowers. Consult with an attorney, make sure you're sort of thinking through all of the different pieces of loan documentation that are necessary to be able to enforce your standing as a creditor to the borrowers. And you may have reasons, for not doing certain types of loan documentation, but CDFIs wanting to buy into your loans or provide you with a wholesale investment will ask you about, well, why aren't you using this form of security or this type of guarantee document, and having an explanation for why is probably very important.
Thank you, Erica. And the next question I have is for Dave. What would you say, what are opportunities you'd like people to know about? And Dave, specifically in your work, where are some prime opportunities for native CDFIs wanting to participate on larger loans?
So I'm happy to endorse, certain groups. I mean, Craft 3 is fantastic. They've been a leader in the field for a really long time. They have an executive staff who are, 120% committed to serving Indian country. But I guess what I would say beyond that, and it's just us native CDFIs and our allies in the room, right? I think, a big part of it is, I think a lot of times we tell our clients, who haven't accessed credit or other forms of capital before that they need to really start developing lender relations. They need to kind of, understand who the banks are and what they're about and the products and services they provide, and make sure that your credit is where it needs to be at to be able to and just kind of engage. And the same thing could be said of native CDFIs, right? How much beyond kind of working with the usual kind of suspects, which might be a federal agency or a foundation. How much have you reached out to the business community, because they have resources that can be activated to serve your needs. But it only begins if you start that relationship. So as you look across the nation, and depending on where you're at, I mean, that's really the question, because we've engaged a number of entities, and in some cases, because there's a expectation that due to CRA or some other purpose, they should be serving tribes, or they should be serving entities within their footprint. In other cases, it's because developed kind of a personal relationship, and there seems to be some interest. But I'll tell you something in terms of the opportunities. Once you identify a potential opportunity, I'll give you the same advice that my board of directors gave me, which was, as you start looking at partnering with other organizations, obviously first and foremost, make sure that your vision, mission, and goals are aligned. But more importantly than that, the relationship can't be just between you, the executive, or the key person there, the native CDFI, and a key person over at the other organization. The relationship really needs to be throughout the organization. Because what happens is that when political winds shift, when priorities change at the other organization, and I experienced this when I worked for the big bank. I was there as part of one of their Native Initiative people, and then Katrina hit, and then just little by little, rural and Native initiatives started going away because the Gulf Coast Initiative was such a big deal. And so that's just kind of that analogy carries over into lots of different kinds of organizations. We partnered with a group, which is a non-native CDFI, and the relationship has been, just tremendous. I mean, it's really blossomed at a number of different levels. And we've got a partnership with another non-native CDFI that, we had similar expectations for. But what happened there was that although the leadership was motivated, the staff was not, and the difference is really telling. And it's not. I'm not placing any blame on the organization. I mean, the organization is what it is, and staff is incentivized in a certain way that really just discouraged them from exposing the organization to the level of risk that they felt was involved in terms of making loans on tribal lands. But I guess what I would say is that, both of those partnerships had tremendous potential, and you won't know where the true opportunity is until you get something on the table, you wrestle with it, and you really start to test how much you're willing to do, how much you can do, and how much the other side is willing and able to do. And all's fair, I mean, if we both put our best effort forward and it didn't happen, it didn't look like it's a good partnership, then, you've at least explored it. And the next one may be much, much better, and that's certainly been the case for us. So in terms of where the opportunities are at, I think, it's hard to say from just, working in the western U.S. And have that apply equally to everybody. But particularly, I guess the ones that I would say that are highly underutilized, that are national, obviously are the 184, the title, the BIA loan guarantee, certainly, the USDA products, including 502 and the intermediary lending program, and the Uplift America program, the CDFI bond guarantee program through Treasury again, the Capital Magnet Fund that'll be coming out. I mean, if we were just kind of to issue a bullet list, I mean, there's no shortage of opportunities. And the shame is that they've been so severely underutilized by tribes and native CDFIs for so long, and now we're in a new era. And I think you can all assume, and probably accurately, what's going to happen in this administration. And I think what that would indicate to me, certainly, is that partnering is going to be that much more important. I mean, and I probably can't put enough emphasis on that. If you're small, if you lack capacity, if you have some areas that without ongoing TA funds from CFI fund or support from your tribal council in terms of appropriations, we could be in for a world of hurt. So, if you haven't thought about partnering, I would really, really encourage you to think about it now. I mean, if there's an opportunity out there, it's the opportunity to partner. So start exploring, start talking, start networking, and give it a go.
Thank you, Dave. I think you brought up a lot of really kind of interesting and strong points, and especially what you're saying, and I kind of think I've heard this from each of you, Dave, Denise, Erica, that you kind of just have to get out there and get started, even if it's just starting, if you're networking and just start the conversation, just kind of get out there and then kind of go from there. And I think that kind of flows into our next question I wanted to pose to all of you. And you've all kind of touched on this a little bit with some of your answers, but what would you say are maybe some key challenges that CDFI should be aware of getting into this? And like I said, I know you touched on this. If there's anything you really want to highlight or kind of give some advice around, and we can kind of go around again. Dave, Denise, Erica. So Dave, I know we just had you, but what would you say maybe are some just key challenges beyond what you've kind of discussed that you'd want to just alert people to make sure they already maybe had a game plan for?
Maybe some of the technical considerations that I know were mentioned earlier. I think there was a suggestion to really have your policies, know your policies, and be able to have them reflect that you're implementing good practices. When we're dealing with foundations, one of the things that's developed there is a lot of hesitancy to engage in something that doesn't have good longitudinal data behind it that shows performance. And so I think you can't expect these organizations to do the work for you. They don't know your organization. They don't know your communities. They don't know your portfolio. And by that same token, a lot of times you might not know what the expectation is in terms of the quality of the portfolio management, and technical details related to, because here's the thing, a lot of the organizations that you might be working with are regulated entities, and so they've got a whole different set of requirements that they are expected to heed, and it's and whereas native CDFIs and CDFIs in general don't have that same burden. So you might hear some things thrown out in terms of as basic as acronyms and basic requirements that are common in financing industry jargon that you may not have heard of. So don't be put off by that. I think a good partner will recognize what the limitations are, and I think the other issue is just in terms of a challenge is kind of getting your organization up to be able to engage those entities. But I think start small, and if you're dealing with foundations in particular, they've got their own lingo as well. And what I've learned about foundations is that if you know one foundation, you know exactly one foundation. They can be so different, and even though staff kind of jump around from foundation to foundation, don't be scared that there's some unknowns there. I think the biggest thing that you could bring to the marketplace is a strong knowledge of your organization, your people, your not just the need but the demand that's there, and then the track record that's been established at your organization, and be able to not just rattle off the numbers, but also, particularly for foundations, be able to address the level of impact that you've been able to have. Both are important. The numbers are particularly important for those regulated entities, and the social impact and economic impact is probably paramount for the foundation folks. So hope that answers the question.
Yes, Dave. And what would you say, Denise, especially just with the work that y'all are doing across the state?
Just kind of reiterating what Dave had said. Definitely know your policies. Working with the tribal entities, with our native CDFI, we are located on the Laguna Reservation, even though we are not a tribal entity. A lot of locations and, of course, again, other entities as well as the members like to assume that we are owned by the tribe. This is where you kind of need to let everybody know what your company is, know your mission, and definitely stand your ground. Because when you do begin partnering, and I'm just using the word they in general, a lot of those that you're trying to partner with don't realize that you can't be controlled. And they will try to implement that in your agreements with the other said entity and so on and so forth. But definitely stand your ground, know your mission, know your policies, because you don't want to get stuck in a bind. Definitely you don't want to get stuck in a bind. And again, kind of what Dave had said earlier, how your relationship needs to be throughout the organization because of the possible change in the chain of command. Everybody needs to work together, because when there's that one missing person, that one missing information, things can get pretty chaotic sometimes. So definitely talk to one another, refer to one another, and just keep those good relations. And always don't forget what your CDFI is there for, or who your CDFI is there for, I should say.
Denise, and what about you, Erica, especially from your perspective, kind of as a partner?
Well, I was going to reiterate a lot of things that have already been said. I wonder if we shouldn't move on, so to make sure that we have enough time for questions. There's one more slide, I think, of questions, and other than, what I was going to say real quick to the specific questions on challenges is just the logistics of communicating with the borrower and making sure that you have, you both are hearing the same thing, because the borrower will, if the borrower knows that you're both involved, they'll try to talk to, and there's problems with the loan, there you might try to tell one lender one thing and another lender the other, but so you just need to make sure you're united and clear communications lines established. So I wanted to be brief so we can move on.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. So yeah, we'll move into our final question before we take. I feel like it definitely makes sense that this would be, communication would be a big issue, just because you're working with a partner and working with somebody else. That's always going to come up. But I feel like I also kind of heard it as kind of a thread within some of the tips you gave and some of the challenges. So I just wanted to be kind of more direct with it too, in terms of asking all the panelists, what level of communication do you prefer from your partners to have this process move kind of as efficiently and smoothly as possible? So that means, before you get started, during, and maybe even after the process. And so I'll go same order, Dave, Denise, Erica. So Dave, do you want to get us started?
I guess just whatever's most effective. I mean, communication has not really been an issue, except when there have been other issues.
Right.
I was talking about that one CFI that we haven't had a good outcome with, and we did our absolute best. I mean, we took their underwriting criteria, we took the format of their credit reports, the underwriters' reports, and we did our analysis, and we put it into the format. And then, this happened like 3 times, okay? And it didn't seem like they could spend, 10 minutes to, look through 5 pages of analysis to be able to have, a realistic kind of evaluation. I mean, the response would be like, it's kind of like, I haven't dated in a really long time, but it's kind of like when you know that girl or that guy's not interested in you, it doesn't matter how good a communication protocol you put in place, they're not interested. Whereas with the other CDFI that we've been working with, the communication takes all kinds of different forms. I mean, we might put something up on Dropbox, and it's a whole file of due diligence, and it's just a matter of sending it over to them. Some of these deals can be summed up in a line or 2 in an email. Here's the terms that we want. Here's how much we want of it. Here's how long we want it. And we got to make sure that we take care of X, Y, or Z. And of course the legal documents are going to be sound and going to cover all the other details, which in many cases are boilerplate. But it could be as simple as that, or it could be as complex as, let's get together and, have a little work session, or let's work on this proposal together that, will help us define better or build some capacity together around X, Y, or Z. So again, I think, the level of communication is whatever it needs to be effective and efficient. But like I said before, the only time communication has been a problem is when there are other problems.
Thanks, Dave. I think that makes a lot of sense. And Denise or Erica, do you have anything you'd want to add to that, Denise?
Again, Dave hit the nail on the head. It just really depends on how extensive, I guess, your partnership is, because there are just those where you can, as Dave said, you can figure out through email. Then there's, I'll use our relationship with the tribe as well with Laguna. If you're handling a large amount of money, of course there's going to be that definite high level of communication. Just that way there's no misunderstanding as far as the agreement goes, especially when your lawyers and whatnot are involved. But it just really varies on the partnership and what you and the partner are going to be creating, just to be short.
Mm-hmm.
And what about you, Erica?
Yeah, I agree. I think it takes all different forms, but it's mostly just important to be on the same page from the beginning to make sure that you're clear on who's playing what role and who's leading and who's leading with the borrower.
Thanks, Erica. And so, like you were saying, we're getting close to the end of the hour. It's 12:57 on my clock, and so just wanted to leave a couple minutes. If any of y'all had any follow-up questions for any of our panelists, anything that you wanted to maybe have them answer a little more deeply, or maybe something we didn't cover. So I'll just give y'all a couple seconds to see if any pop through. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. It means y'all must have done a really good job of explaining some of the challenges and some of the work that you've done, and I think some very good tips for anybody wanting to kind of get started with these loan participations. So all that being said, I want to thank you all, panelists, again, so much for joining us and sharing with us. I think this is such a helpful and informational panel, and I also want to thank everyone for participating in the webinar, and like always, make sure and point out that there's a very brief survey that should pop up when you close the webinar, and just please fill it out. It helps us track the series, make sure that we continue to improve and do better. So all that said, join us next month for our February webinar. Oh, we did have a question pop in. What does it say? It says, go ahead, Stephanie.
It says, Erica, I'm wondering if Craft would consider working with an Idaho tribe.
You know, I know that we've talked. I'm sorry. Did we finish? Is that the end of the
Yep, that was
question? Great. I know it has been broached a number of times. We did whether or not to expand into Idaho. We did just about a year and a half ago open our Spokane office, and so you know, I think depending on where the tribe is, if it's you know, close to I guess that would be western Idaho, you know, we would consider it, but that would be above. That would I'd probably hand you off to talk to Mike Dickerson, who is sort of our person. He's one of the co-founders of Craft3 and has really led the charge on all of our Indian country initiatives, and is also sort of continuing to lead on where and how we expand our office, our sort of geography in general. So I'm glad to take your question directly to him if you'd like to start conversations. So you can provide my email address, Heather, if you wanted, or my contact
information when we send out the kind of closing webinar stuff at the end of the day. So that would be perfect. And I just want to make sure to point out to check out that 2015 report again by Opportunity Finance Network on CDFI collaborations, keys to success, because it'll also have some good tips for y'all, and we'll include that in the email we send at the end of today too. And next month, our February webinar is going to take place February 23rd at noon Mountain Time, and it's going to be Investment Tools and Strategies Part 1. It's going to be another panel discussion, and we'll be sharing more information on that soon. So I guess that being said, have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Heather, and thanks, OISTA, for hosting the webinar.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes,
Bye.
thank you.